And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
And we're back, Cover One, the draft podcast. I'm Russell Brown. Joining me, as always, CP Christian Page. CP, how we doing, man?
Doing good, my man. How are you?
Hey, it's Thursday night, getting ready to go on a walk in probably about 30, 40 minutes. It's 60 degrees outside. Can't really complain there. Staying safe. My kid turns 10 in 2 days. It's crazy. And we got draft talk on our agenda, so it's good.
Amen to that. Happy birthday, Tyler.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's weird. Went from single digits to now double digits forever. It's crazy. Anyways, let's talk draft. Let's do our thing. It's been a busy week over at cover1.net. If you guys have not been paying attention, you need to go over to the website. You need to get the Cover One app for absolutely free. Just simply go to your app store, search Cover One, download for free, get the push notifications. This is the time to do it, especially with so much NFL draft content coming your way from us. Myself, I've put together a piece building around Joe Burrow for the Cincinnati Bengals of what they should do. That dropped. I also had 3 players that I feel like have kind of been forgotten about, maybe have flown under the radar a little bit through the draft process over the last month or two. So I brought those 3 names up in a recent article, and CP here did a phenomenal job with a 2020 NFL Draft Offensive Line Experience article that has you have to scroll. There is a ton of information here, but it's essentially offensive linemen by the numbers, and it's a great piece with every bit of offensive linemen in this draft, from starts at left tackle, left guard, right tackle, etc. So let's start with this piece. How long did this take you to do? Because I know you had said last week that you've been working on a lot of data entry stuff, and I know this was in the mix, but how long did this really take?
Yeah, it took quite a bit. I mean, just with, working sometimes during the day and then working at night. But it's a fun piece to research because you really learn. Of course, you can always watch guys on film, but you really learn how many games that they played, and then you forget about, they came over from this school and they were successful at both schools, and how long they've been starting ever since a freshman to a senior. I mean, some of the biggest takeaways, and we knew this just covering college football all year. I swear, every Oregon starter on the offensive line had at least 40 starts. and Penei Sewell, the probably OT1 coming in the next year's draft class, probably be in that same regards because he started, I think, ever since as a true freshman. So Clemson, Oregon, Michigan had a lot of guys with a lot of experience as well, which, of course, like I said in the intro, and we just talked about it before we hit record, that experience doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have that upper edge on somebody else, but experience is something you can't teach. And that's what I wrote in my intro. It's not something that you can teach in mini camps, or you come in and you can gain that over a week. You can have those physical traits, but experience matters in a certain standpoint when you're talking about maybe that learning curve or just the more dynamic of opponents that you have. So this was just a really fun piece. I know I'm going a little deeper with your question there, but it was definitely worth the time and the effort to put this thing together.
No, I mean, it really is. I mean, there's a ton of information here. I mean, for example, you've got Mekhi Becton here. He's played 35 career games. He's had 33 career starts. He's got 21 career starts on the left side, 12 on the right side. So it's very cool to see how it's broken down. One of the interesting ones that I found was Cole Cabral from Arizona State, if I said that right. He's played 50 games in his career. He's got almost 40 starts, but it's the weirdest. It's so weird in my opinion. He had 24 career starts at center and then 15 starts at left tackle. How a player goes from center to left tackle is beyond me, or even vice versa. But I mean, what were some of the more, I don't know, what was one of the more interesting ones that you came across? Maybe that was the one, but I mean, what were some of the ones that you figured were the most interesting?
Yeah, his definitely was because Cabral went from starting, I think, the first 2 games at left tackle in 2019 and starting the remainder, I think, 11 games at center. So he's kind of an underrated guy, too. So I'm glad he was invited to the Combine because every time you watch Eno Benjamin in that Arizona State offense, he kind of stands out, opens a lot of stuff in the interior. As far as really anybody standing out, not necessarily anybody jumps out as far as just name recognition goes. I mean, a lot of the guys that you're seeing projected at left tackle, like Josh Jones from Houston, he started all 45 games he played in, and he all starts at left tackle. Somebody like, Charlie Heck, I think there's a little versatility there. Right tackle, 20 starts, 14 at left tackle. But then you have, some other guys like Jack Driscoll, who came over from UMass, started a few games there, 8 games at right guard, and then started the remainder of his career at Auburn and the rest at UMass at right tackle with 38 starts there. So I think it is also interesting to note that, some of the guys in here that may lack the experience on paper, it's hard to research and get those junior college statistics. So I definitely took note of that in this study to say, hey, there may have only been 2 to 3 games or 2 to 3 years charted in this scenario because those JUCO statistics were not carried over. So maybe if you're looking at, somebody like Yasir Durant from Missouri, who is a junior college guy, he may be missing, 10 to 12 games that you would expect from a 4-year player, but you have to take into account that those JUCO statistics weren't necessarily factored in as well. But actually, I did find one guy that was very interesting. Danny Pinter out of Ball State. Didn't know anything really about him till coming into this study. I believe he was an NFL Combine invite. He has 24 starts at right tackle, but I did not factor in the 2 years that he played tight end. So I did not factor in those games. So I think it is interesting that, we're looking at numbers here, but you also take into effect just kind of the journey as far as, what positions that they played, not necessarily all up front on the offensive line, but in Pinter's situation, came over from tight end and fit in over at right tackle for Ball State. So pretty cool just to sit there and research some of these guys and just seeing which guys that, you may think have a handful of experience and they may not, or some guys that you think are, on that back end day 3 that have 50 games of starting experience and you just forgot about it.
For sure. And then you've got guys like, and I was going to ask you about Pinter, so I'm glad you brought that up, that he had played a little bit of tight end because you've got like asterisks next to guys' names and stuff like that. So it kind of insinuates the JUCO or tight end and stuff like that. So it's very cool. But Kyle Murphy, Rhode Island, I mean, this guy here has played all over the offensive line outside of right guard. He's had 21 starts at left tackle, 5 at right tackle, 9 at left guard, and 1 at center. So, I mean, this is a guy that I've never watched yet. I mean, I don't even know if I'll get to him by the time we get to the draft in a few weeks. But, I mean, it's just one of those things like you pull these numbers up, you can kind of get a feel for a guy, and then you can go even deeper and probably find some games where you can watch them. So it's a very cool tool. Check it out over at cover1.net. And, of course, I mean, you can find it on the app as well. So get the app, the Cover One app for free in your app store. So that's the offensive line piece. I had dropped I don't know how you would specify it, but a piece around Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals and how they should really build this draft around him because there is so much offensive firepower in this draft. And I mean, I think they've made it very clear that they want to put some money and get some upgrades on their defense, which they did by getting Trey Waynes, DJ Reader into their secondary and defensive line. And they've also added Von Bell and Mackenzie Alexander. So, I mean, they've done quite a bit to this defense. They've gotten rid of a guy like Cordy Glenn, so they really don't have a left tackle. So I think it's really going to be quarterback, offensive line for this draft, at least for the early going, because they need to get some starters there. Bobby Hart's the right tackle. I don't buy into that too much. And then, they've got guys like Billy Price and Michael Jordan out of Ohio State playing left guard and center, but you just don't really know what you can get out of those guys because Michael Jordan is still somewhat of a developmental player, but on top of it, Billy Price has just been injury prone the last few years. So it's been really tough for them to develop that offensive line. So, I mean, I think that's what the draft should be for them. And I highlight a couple of guys in the second round. Cesar Ruiz from Michigan, I think would be an ideal fit for them at 33 if he's there. There's a chance he could be the first interior offensive lineman off the board. He could be a first rounder. Ezra Cleveland out of Boise State, I think makes a lot of sense for them as well, especially if you're looking at a left tackle, just from the perspective of you get a guy that's got tons of experience, but on top of it, he's an athletic freak as well. He was one of the most athletic offensive linemen at the draft, or at the combine, excuse me. He had a 3-cone drill of 7.26 seconds and a short shuttle time of 4.446. So, good size at 6'6", 311. I think he's a really good technician. I've actually wrote deeper onto him and threw some film in a deeper player profile article last week, so you guys can check that out as well. An interesting one that I liked was T. Higgins, the receiver for Clemson. If he was there in the second round, I think it would be a really smart idea for them to try to maybe pair Higgins up with Joe Burrow, just simply because I think it could be productive. I know he's not an athletic freak, but, 25 touchdowns in 2 years. Higgins, we know about the body control. We know how well he boxes guys out. I think it would be a really good move that would probably, maybe I'm just scouting the helmet, but his play style is very similar to Mike Williams when he came out of Clemson and went to the Chargers. Am I wrong in thinking that?
No, I think he may show a little more, flexibility on the inside. But I think both played a very similar role. They're going to beat you with some of their physical skills and their vertical, boundary type alignments. So no, I definitely see some of the similarities between the two.
Wouldn't it be weird too, like an LSU quarterback throwing to a Clemson receiver? How would you consider that pairing, Burrow and Higgins?
They're two very strong programs, so I would love it. Just if I was a fan of Cincinnati, because it means like, hey, we're getting two guys that play the national title and two of the better ones on their respective teams. So why not? Let's go for it.
It would be fun, and I think it gives you a little bit more certainty at the position because Tyler Boyd's not a number one receiver. John Ross is really hit or miss at this point, could be even considered a lost cause. And A.J. Green could also be a lost cause just simply because you lose him for 6 to 7 years or 6 to 7 games every year, it seems like. So, I think they need to look at upgrading that receiver room. If they don't do it in the second and third round, I think on the third day of the draft, Tyler Johnson out of Minnesota would make a lot of sense, depending on where he falls and really where they value him. But it seems like he could be a day 3 guy. So I think he would be really good for them just operating out of the slot if you have A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, and Tyler Johnson with the speed of John Ross as well. I think that's pretty good.
I'm going to cut in here real quick. So when you were thinking about this situation with them drafting a wide receiver with their second-round pick, put this scenario together. You have a guy like T. Higgins who has maybe more of a wide receiver profile, wide receiver one profile than a Justin Jefferson. Mm-hmm. But how much do you think the Bengals would consider taking Burrow's teammate with Jefferson with that round 2 pick, assuming he's there? I know he had a really solid combine and is penciled in as a first-round guy right now. But do you think between Higgins or Jefferson, and take all into effect of all the plus points that Jefferson has with that camaraderie with Burrow, how comfortable would you feel taking Jefferson over a guy like T. Higgins that may have a little more physical qualities, just based on the consensus draft media goes, to be that wide receiver one?
Yeah, if Higgins and Jefferson were both there, I'm under the assumption, and I want everybody to keep in mind that the players that I have in here are really the players that I could see them being available at that spot. Jefferson, I don't think will be there at 33, but if he was, like you're thinking or saying here in this scenario, yeah, I would 100% be on board for that. And I think Joe Burrow would be as well, because, you're talking about Jefferson, who at 6'1", just over 200 pounds, ran a 4.38 and moved incredibly well at the combine, and when you watch the tape, and I've said this numerous podcasts ago of how well he attacks the middle of the field, he does just that, and he's a big slot receiver. I mean, that would be his role, I think, in the Bengals, at least with Boyd and Green there. You could put him in the slot. You're going to get a ton of production out of him. I mean, he had over 100 receptions this past year. He had 18 touchdowns. 12 of those touchdowns were in the red zone. But on top of all of that, I mean, over 1,500 of his yards were operating out of the slot. So I think he would be a great asset. I think the camaraderie, the connection, the just all of that, I think would be perfect. So if he's there, and maybe if he's still there, I don't know, let's say 25 or 26 or something, it wouldn't surprise me if the Bengals moved up and got him. I'll be honest. I mean, why wouldn't you? I would totally trade up for that guy, just knowing that I think the connection and the production would be there for Jefferson and Burrow, especially for Burrow, considering that you want him to come into the league and you want him to be comfortable. I mean, we've heard so much about him in this situation. We don't really know if he wants to go there or not. I'm assuming he does, but you just never know. And, I mean, he's put it to bed saying he'll play for whoever, but I mean, again, you never know. And with the media, the way the media is, you want him to be comfortable. So I would want him to be comfortable, and having a familiar face would be, one of the key things for me if I'm the Bengals and Zach Taylor.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I just think that'd be a cool scenario that you get the best 1-2 punch as far as quarterback and wide receiver goes a year ago, and then you may see them play together for, who knows, 4 to all the way up to 8 to 10 years. And I think that would be just an incredible marriage and just kind of, I guess, ironic. Maybe that's the wrong term to use, but I think that would be just really fun. And then, that would give Burrow, maybe like you were talking about, a little more spark to be happy about his situation in Cincinnati.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's some other day 3 guys on here as well that I have, like John Simpson, Logan Stenberg. I have some names listed, as well as if you highlight the name LaMichael Pirine on there, you click the link, it'll take you to an article I wrote about him last year. If you go to the right, there's, in parentheses, just kind of a brief wording of like the Bengals coached John Simpson at the Senior Bowl. So if you click that, it'll pull up some clips from my Twitter and it'll redirect you to that. So definitely check it out. I will say this, and I'll end on this. My favorite pick for them, I mean, outside of obviously Joe Burrow, and in the scenario that we had previously, I mean, Justin Jefferson would make perfect sense if he's there. But in the third round, I think at 65, it might be a little rich for some people, but I mean, according to that tweet that we were talking about previously from Lance Zierlein off of NFL.com, he had sent a tweet out today talking about the offensive linemen and basically ranking like 8 of the offensive tackles. And Isaiah Wilson was like number 5 or 6 on that list. I can't remember the exact order, other than Jedrick Wills was first and Andrew Thomas was 3rd or 4th. But Isaiah Wilson is like 5th or 6th on this list. And it's like, that's interesting to me, just simply because, I mean, I think he's good. I don't think he's great. But in the second round, I feel like that's a little rich. But, I mean, I think he'd be a really good fit for them on the right side. I mean, I talked about it, how they need to get an improvement on the right side of their offensive line. And I think Isaiah Wilson would be a step in the right direction. He's got over a 35.5-inch wingspan. His hands are over 10 inches. And I get it. Hand size does not really matter, and wingspan does not really matter. But at 6'5", 350, I mean, this guy moves pretty well for a guy that size, and he will maul you. I mean, he's just a mauling type of player. Doesn't necessarily move well in space, but again, he's got really strong hands. The grip strength is there. And I think if you just have him in that base kind of man-to-man role for a right tackle where he's, he might have to do some things schematically in a zone block or whatever, but if he's just going mano a mano against a guy, he's probably going to win 9 times out of 10, it feels like. So I really like him in that round, in that range, especially for a team like the Bengals as they build around Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I mean, like you just ended it, build around Joe Burrow, that would definitely be a building block to an offensive line that, like you said, it continues to develop, but we don't know what it's developing into. I mean, like you said, Billy Price has had injuries. Michael Jordan is I don't say slow in development, but I mean, that's what he was when he came onto the scene. And then Jonah Williams, your first round pick from a year ago, we get to see him play. So there's just a lot of, I don't know if there's there was patchwork throughout the year, but now we're just waiting for it to unfold, and the uncertainty of that and bringing in a quarterback like Joe Burrow, it's very scary. So just for safety precautions, bring in another offensive line, maybe more of a fine-tuned one if you can, unlike Wilson, but I think Wilson with the right coaching, he'll be a perfect solution for Cincinnati on that O-line.
For sure. But let's jump into our draft options. We did this last week. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, that's really where the, Joe Burrow article stemmed from. And we did it last week where we did the draft options for the AFC North, and we did the Bengals, the Browns, everybody in that division. Today we're doing the NFC West, and we're going to do this each week leading up to the draft. And there's a pretty good chance probably next week we'll do two, and then the following week we'll do two more, or maybe close out the whole thing. But today, NFC West, Arizona, San Francisco, the LA Rams, and then the Seattle Seahawks. So we'll start in the first round, and really that will be what we're really looking at. But Arizona at 8, very interesting offseason for them. I mean, the big thing was trading David Johnson, getting DeAndre Hopkins. They still have the 8th overall pick. What direction do you think they go in with this 8th overall pick?
I think you have to look at offensive line. I mean, it's one of the pretty obvious primary needs as far as any team goes, as far as looking toward the draft. I mean, take the best offensive tackle available. Whether you're looking at left or right tackle, Marcus Gilbert at right tackle is their current starter there. DJ Humphries, who to me has never really panned out. I know he's athletic and I know he shows flashes, but I think when you can get your hands on a top 2, maybe even the best tackle in the class, depending on how this draft unfolds. Still think New York Giants at 4 is going to take the best offensive tackle on their board. But, hey, get the second best tackle here, whether that's Andrew Thomas, Tristan Wirfs, Mekhi Becton, or Jedrick Wills, depending on how the draft flows. I think that's the direction you have to go here at number 8, assuming, I think previously, this was a popular landing spot for the first wide receiver taken in the 2020 draft, but obviously that's now going away because D-Hop is now an Arizona Cardinal. So I think they definitely have to address either the right or left side as far as tackle goes with that number 8 overall pick.
Yeah, completely agree. I circled the Jedrick Wills every single time. I just think he would be a perfect fit for them. I know, like you mentioned, they have Marcus Gilbert, but he was only signed to a 1-year deal. So Wills would be the long-term answer for them. They would have him on a 5-year contract with the rookie contract. So I think he'd be a home run pick for them at 8. And I would be under the assumption that there's already an offensive tackle off the board, considering that the Giants would probably take one. You never really know, though. Maybe the Chargers do as well. You don't know exactly what's going to happen at 4, 6, and really, I guess 7 either. Maybe Carolina could do it, but I don't see that happening since they traded for Russell Okung. They drafted Greg Little last year, who, yeah, he's trash, but whatever. Jedrick Wills, though, for Arizona makes a lot of sense. What do you think they do from a, I don't know, day 2, day 3 type of perspective? Do you think that they look at, I mean, they have Kenyon Drake, but he split some time with David Johnson. Do you think that they consider a running back in regards to, I don't know, maybe Eno Benjamin, maybe Clyde Edwards-Helaire, maybe I doubt Swift or Taylor are there. Maybe J.K. Dobbins would be there at 72. I mean, would you be on board for them to go offensive tackle and running back, or do you have a different position in the 3rd round for them in mind?
I think they have to address pass rushing because, I know they have a guy like Chandler Jones, but their front 4 or they're 3-4 with occasional, edge player with their hand in the dirt, which would be Chandler Jones. I mean, is Zach Allen your secondary pass rusher? Because that's not a good recipe, especially in a division that I think that if they're going to be considered with themselves or can be considered as one of the top teams, if they're going to sit there and contend with a Seattle and San Francisco, which, they're making the off-season moves to put themselves into that conversation, you got to get better at attacking the quarterback, whether that is Russell Wilson, Jimmy Garoppolo, and other teams on their schedule. So I think they should address that secondary pass rusher. At 72, that's hard because this is not a great edge rushing defensive end class. And so at 72, maybe you're looking at a guy like Bradley Anae out of Utah, which I think he brings a lot of nuance to that position, a lot of upper body quickness, explosive first step. He had a really good Senior Bowl week, an outstanding Senior Bowl game. So maybe he's a guy you consider there. But I think there's enough comfort there And if you just follow Arizona's marketing, especially on Twitter, they love Kenyon Drake. So I don't think there's any plans for them to maybe find a replacement for him as far as starter goes. But consider depth definitely with maybe pick 114 overall or maybe 131 overall. I think this running back class is deep enough for a complimentary back for Kenyon Drake. But I think they definitely need to address at least something in that front seven just to shore up things on defense. I think their secondary is fine. There's a lot of really good players there, but I think that front three needs to be addressed, especially from a pass rushing perspective.
I could see them going in the trenches as well. Good point. Bradley and that would be a solid addition. So I would be excited for that if I'm Cardinals fans. If you got Jedrick Wills and Bradley and or, Andrew Thomas and Bradley and something like that, that would be really good for them. So let's move to the team that really it's this NFC West discussion today stemmed from the San Francisco 49ers. They've got the 13th pick and the 31st pick of the draft. They don't pick again until 157. So these first two picks for them are very important. They're one of few teams that have multiple first-round picks. What do you think that they do with the 13th pick? I mean, they moved on from DeForest Buckner, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. What do you think they do?
Yeah, I think naturally with that 13th pick in their hands, that they got it for Buckner, like you said, I think naturally you look at guys that would be available that would fill a very similar role would be Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina. But to me, if they were just going to, move on from Buckner, get the 13th overall pick, and then pick a guy that has maybe similar attributes, similar play demeanor, whatever it may be, to me, I feel like wouldn't you feel more comfortable with a guy that's been in the league for a handful of years, commit to him long term, even though it would be more expensive. But when I would feel more comfortable doing that when still having that 31st overall pick. I know cap space and everything, you have to consider that, but I think that's why there could be wide receiver on the brain for them at pick number 13. Sure, they don't need all these kind of pass catchers. They have guys like George Kittle, who's probably the best and most consistent tight end in the NFL right now. Deebo Samuel took a huge step forward. So when you're looking at a wide receiver at pick 13, who knows? You could have first pick out of the litter, Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb or Henry Ruggs. But I think if you could get a dynamic player like Jerry Jeudy at pick 13, I think that would make a lot of sense. And try to convince Kyle Shanahan to not do that. Jimmy Garoppolo, don't get me wrong, he's a talented quarterback. He has a lot of the physical skills that you like. I think he needs to be a little more consistent vertically. But if you get him a receiver with the dynamic ability of Jerry Jeudy, that consistent and constant separation that he can create, that gives a huge safety blanket to Garoppolo, who needs pieces around him to succeed, in my opinion. He has that with the running game. He has some security blankets with Kittle and with Samuel. But I think another complementary piece with Jerry Jeudy or whoever they think the best wide receiver is would be an awesome pick at pick 13. However, the biggest question I have with it, do you pick a receiver at pick 13 and expect him to be your wide receiver one and your first option for Garoppolo, or is he still going to play second fiddle and possibly even third fiddle in a wide receiver pass catching room that is talented but needs that extra punch? So I think that's the only thing that would be the negative, if that makes sense, if I explain that correctly, would be the only negative with taking wide receiver at 13. But then I think you maybe look at pick 31, you get your cornerback. Maybe that's, I don't know, C.J. Henderson. I doubt he falls that far, but maybe a Jeff Gladney. Depending on, the consensus of Christian Fulton is all over the place. That is the consensus. There isn't one. So who knows? He may be available at pick 31, which would be awesome if you could tag team somehow, get Jeudy and Fulton and put them into your system. I think that would be awesome. But maybe if they don't address interior defensive line, they look at receiver at 13.
Yeah, I've been so indifferent on what everybody is thinking on Christian Fulton. I mean, they're all over the place. People love the natural athletic ability of C.J. Henderson. And, I mean, he understands how to use the length that he has. He's lower body is super quick. So, I mean, I get it. But, I mean, Christian Fulton's just a dog, man. He's a physical. He gets after it. He's not afraid of anything or anyone. So, I mean, I thought he was possibly a fit for them at 13 because I still think he's a top 15 player in this class. And I thought, hey, him at 13, he still tested well too. It wasn't like he ran a 4.55 or something. He still tested pretty damn well at the combine. So, I mean, him at 13 and maybe Brandon Ayuk or something at 31, that would be a home run, especially if you're trying to, consider just the replacement of Emmanuel Sanders. So, like, I love the thought of that. But, yeah, I mean, Jerry Jeudy at 13 is an absolute home run. And like you mentioned, if you can get Fulton at 31, I mean, why wouldn't you do that? So, we could see at pick 11, Henry Ruggs to the Jets. We could see at 12, CeeDee Lamb to the Raiders. And at 13, we could see Jerry Jeudy at 13 to the 49ers. I mean, it's so crazy on how these receivers could go in the top 15 because I think all three of them will be gone in the top 15. It's just where and when is what it's going to be. But I love the idea of Jerry Jeudy. That could maybe be the steal of this draft at 13 because he would be a dynamic fit in that offense and really help that offense take this step into the next level. I mean, they're already very good. They run the ball very well. Like you said, they've got George Kittle. They've got pieces, no doubt about it. But Jerry Jeudy would put them in just a different dynamic in the receiver position. So I think it would also help guys like, Dante Pettis develop. Maybe not. I mean, maybe it pushes them down the depth chart, but I don't know. I love the fit of Jerry Jeudy. I like that one as well. Would a defensive tackle be on board at 31? I mean, would a Ross Blacklock be a thought for them, or would they be a team that maybe moves back from 31 to somewhere in the second round and maybe they get an additional fourth rounder or something, and then they could add a corner in the second round, or like a Damon Arnett or something in the second round, and then maybe like a Devon Hamilton or something for their defensive line in that fourth round if they were to get those types of picks. I mean, that obviously sounds like a win if you're anybody, but is that a possibility for them to move back, do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, given John Lynch's brief background in the draft, he's not going to stay content of what he has in his hand right now. He's going to move in some way. I mean, he already did. So maybe that was a precursor of what was to come. So he already did and got that top 15 pick at number 13 for Buckner and the Colts. But I do not see them waiting around from pick 31 or wherever they may be all the way to the fifth round. Like that doesn't – and I know they've accumulated a lot of picks in the past, so they feel good about their roster. Obviously, they were in the Super Bowl this year. Probably should have won it if you want to go down that rabbit hole. But I just don't see them staying content because I think there are some needs that they could grab a few guys that could play a vital role in them taking that next step and actually winning the whole thing. And so they could sacrifice some picks, whether it's in this year's drafts or maybe a player that's still on the roster that could be moved around. But they definitely have to address the corner position. They need to address something in the interior defensive line, which I think there's enough pieces there right now. There's enough experience. Solomon Thomas has been a bust so far, but he's at least played some kind of role to show some kind of consistent contributions for them to maybe feel comfortable going forward. But when you're looking at another pass catcher, and then you're looking at that interior defensive line and a corner, then you're going to have to look to add those with 3 picks before the top, 125 picks. So right now they don't have that. So I definitely think, like you said, they're going to have to do some shuffling to at least come away with maybe 3 picks in those first 115, 125 picks to feel comfortable about those players making a significant impact in 2020.
Move into a team that does not have a first-round pick. They gave up they traded for Jalen Ramsey, got rid of a first-round pick, which the Jacksonville Jaguars now have. That's the 20th pick of the draft, and it should belong to the Rams, but it does not, like I mentioned. So they are not on the clock until pick 52, and then they have pick 84 and then 104. So this is a team that got rid of Todd Gurley. I don't know what the Rams are doing, to be honest. I mean, it's hard to gauge exactly what's going to be there at that selection, but this is a team that's spent quite a bit of money for Sean Robinson. They just gave a 3-year extension to a 38-year-old left tackle. They gave some money to Michael Brockers to stay. So I don't know what this team is doing. I mean, they've got Henderson in their backfield, but they could very well be in the position in the second round to get one of the, first-tier backs, I guess we call it, DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins. I mean, Would one of those guys make a lot of sense at 52? Do you think one of those guys will be there?
Yeah, I think one of them will be. I'm interested to know if any running back's going to be selected in the first round. I mean, there's a case where you could make maybe for a couple guys like a DeAndre Swift, and depending on what teams think about Taylor and Dobbins. But, maybe kind of somebody like Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be a landing spot here. Or, if you're looking further back, just kind of taking your question a step further with the running backs, you're looking at pick 84. Maybe like a Zach Moss or Michael Pirine. That may be a little too early, but I think guys that can kind of match that physicality that Gurley brought, but also add a little bit of speed and dynamic ability that maybe Gurley didn't ultimately offer. I know he was a sound pass catcher, but maybe guys that can, take that to the next level, and I think those guys could offer that. So I think there's enough diverse options at running back later in the portion of their draft. Having, pick 104 and pick 126 in the fourth round, I think they could definitely find a complimentary back for Henderson or Malcolm Brown, whoever they feel like going forward. So, but with pick 52, I don't know. They need some kind of youthful edge play because, they signed Michael Brockers back on the team. I always pronounce his name wrong, whether it's Abukum or Ebukam, however you say his name, their weak side outside linebacker. And they get Leonard Floyd to come over, who's kind of played more of that inside backer role, and maybe not that necessarily that dynamic pass rusher, at least what his role was at Georgia. It didn't really translate necessarily to Chicago. Still a decent pass rusher, but he's playing more off the ball than at least I anticipated. So maybe they could find maybe a stand-up edge rusher, maybe like a Julian Okwara. I think if pick 52 could make a lot of sense. Curtis Weaver out of Boise State, I'm not a big fan of him, but he could make a lot of sense as far as need goes here in the position that they're in. So I don't know. They could also address the center position. Pick 52, Cushenberry out of LSU, Biotish, your guy out of Wisconsin, could make a lot of sense too. I took your question and ran with it from multiple angles, but there you go. There was my dissection of the Rams' draft.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, though. I mean, there's a ton of need for them in a lot of different spots. I mean, I think edge rusher is a very interesting one. I mean, they've obviously spent the money on their defensive line, so it would be interesting to see if they spend a draft pick there, at least an early one. But, I mean, even if they did it at 104 or even 84, I mean, and I'm with you on Curtis Weaver. I mean, he's just weird body. It's just a weird player, a weird evaluation, that's for sure. But, Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 52 would be, I think, a home run. And if he was there, I don't think he will be, but if he was there at 84, Tyler Biotish, man, that's a pretty good 1-2 punch to not have a first-round pick, in my personal opinion. Not the splashiest picks in the world, but two guys that make a ton of sense for them. I'm not saying that they should go after a wide receiver just because of, guys like Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Brandon Cooks. But, I mean, Kupp has battled through some injuries. Brandon Cooks had an injury last year. So, I mean, I'm curious if they value that position at all, especially with such a deep draft. I mean, maybe that's something they consider at 104 or 126. I don't know exactly what receiver they would consider, but, I mean, when we've had the conversation of maybe 25 players drafted in the first 3 rounds or from the receiver position, I mean, maybe a guy like Van Jefferson would be in the mix for them. Again, one of those guys that seems almost forgotten about. So I would be curious to see where they would value a receiver in this draft. Somewhere I feel like they should take a look at somebody. It doesn't have to be at the top of the draft, obviously, or even with those first few picks, but somewhere in this draft, I think they should consider somebody, maybe like Joe Reed out of Virginia as well. Maybe that would be somebody just simply because he can play in the backfield. He can play out of the slot. I think Sean McVay would know how to utilize a player like that. And he would be like just a little difference maker for that offense. So it'd be fun to see that. So those are just a couple of names for sure. And then lastly, Seattle at 27. What do they do? I mean, seriously, they got 2 second-round picks. They got 101, so they got pick 27, 59, 64, and 101. You never know what the Seahawks are doing in the first round ever. I could see them, like I said, they could be a team that trades back. Cincinnati moves up and gets Justin Jefferson if he's there. I mean, it's not out of the realm, but, I mean, what do you think they do at 27?
Yeah, Seattle has a good draw here. I mean, like you said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 picks in the first 4 rounds. So that's a really good draw that they have there. But like you said, they're probably going to trade. They if there are betting odds for trading, there probably is. If there's betting odds for teams trading out of their first round, I think Seattle would be on the upper half of that, just based on, given just the unpredictability of how they always play the draft, especially on that Thursday night of opening in the draft. But I think they have to address the defensive end position and truly the defensive end position, because Jadeveon Clowney, he ain't coming back. If he did, I feel like he would have signed last week. I know his price tag is very expensive right now, but I think a team with some cap space is really going to enjoy having him, because it seems like he's kind of rejuvenated his career finally when he strung together a season of health. LJ Collier, their first round pick from a year ago. I know he didn't start any games. He played 11 games this year, did not record a sack, but he's still kind of more of that run stuffing type defensive end, more of that throwback defensive end, opens things up for the exterior to make plays on the outside there. So I think they need more of a flashy, more twitchy edge rusher. I mean, who doesn't? I mean, every coach wants that. But pick 27, it's going to be hard to find that. They may get fortunate and find a guy like Yetur Gross-Matos, the Penn State defensive end, that has some explosiveness, some short area quickness, has fine-tuned up some of his upper body pass rushing elements. So I think that could be an option for them at pick 27, because even though I know we said, they have a really good draw with how many picks they have in the first 4 rounds, but you don't want to wait till pick 59 to get an edge rusher, because it's not going to be there. You're going to have to really coach up some guys, maybe like a Notre Dame player like Okwara or Khalid Kareem, the defensive end from Notre Dame as well. Maybe that would be an option. But I think they have to look at pass rushing here and truly just that defensive end, hand in the dirt type player, because right now your edge rushers are Collier, Bruce Irvin, and with, sprinkles of, Shaquem Griffin and KJ Wright coming on the outside. That's not a good pass rushing, unit as far as that goes. So I think they have to address that as early as possible. And maybe that means even trading up for somebody. So I think Seattle definitely needs to address that if they want to be even more competitive in this division.
I wonder if a guy like an AJ Epinesa, if he gets into the 20s somewhere, if that would be a guy that they'd be interested in moving up for. I mean, starting the year, Epinesa, most people had him as a top 10 pick. Now it seems like the consensus has him around probably closer to 20 to 25, which, I mean, I understand he didn't test very well at the combine. A guy that loves to bull rush, but again, maybe that's something that they consider at 27. I circle always back to Austin Jackson out of USC for them. I know he's not great. I don't think he's great, but I think at a 20-year-old guy with the tools that he has, I think a team can maybe piece something together. But I know that the Seahawks have signed some guys in free agency, BJ Finney, Agube, however the hell you say his name, the kid out of Texas A&M. He was with the Bengals. He signed a deal with the Seahawks. So, I mean, every time they need an offensive lineman, it seems like they find some versatile guys and then they just make it work and that's it. And they don't draft one in the first round. So maybe Jackson at 27 is a little rich for some, but I still think he makes a lot of sense because I doubt he'll be there at pick 59. So I think that they should consider that. But it's, I guess, like you said, what are they going to value more, an edge rusher or an offensive lineman, and primarily an offensive tackle? So I guess it would depend on what's on the board. Gross-Matos or Epinesa I would certainly have on my board over Jackson. But again, I still like Jackson quite a bit for them. So other than that, I mean, I don't see what else the Seahawks would really do outside of maybe getting some depth pieces, maybe at linebacker. Maybe they're a potential landing spot for a guy like Joe Bacci. He seems like a player that would fit their linebacker room pretty well, just an instinctive guy, productive, and it would allow him to get his feet wet in the NFL and then maybe potentially develop into that starter that they would need down the line. They traded for Quentin Dunbar, so their secondary I think is okay. Maybe they consider a safety in this draft. I know they got rid of Tedrick Thompson, but maybe a safety somewhere in this draft is something that they could consider. And maybe at 27, maybe Grant Delpit's there, or maybe they're the team that pulls the trigger on Jeremy Chin in the first round. I know that's been a rumor that's been discussed in recent weeks. So maybe that's somebody, or maybe a Kyle Duggar. You never know with the Seahawks. they're always such an interesting team. But do you have anything else to add to the NFC West for us, my man?
Oh, just thinking of safety with Seattle and their pick 27, which this may be a little rich because I know there's some injury baggage with them, but Antoine Winfield Jr., I would love him in a Seattle uniform. I was watching him a little bit more today, and he has the versatility and the reliability at each position as Mika Fitzpatrick did at Alabama, and as he currently does, as he showed some of that versatility and that matchup-specific type role in Miami and now in Pittsburgh, and he's playing at a very high level. He has kind of the body type and also flexibility and versatility as like a Tyrann Mathieu, and he plays like his hair's on fire too. So he kind of, if you mesh those two together, I'm not saying he's going to be an elite player like those guys, but he kind of plays a similar role. I don't think he's as athletic as a Matthews. He has a Mathieu. He has a little bit of lower body stiffness, just a little bit. You see it maybe exposed when he's playing in some of those rare occasions and just man-on-man and press and sometimes in the slot. But just watching him play, I mean, he is an explosive playmaker. He is a magnet to the football. I would really like that match, really for any team. But I think seeing what Seattle's done in the past with defensive backs, I would love the role that he could play in that Seattle defense.
Yeah, there's always those surprising picks at the end of the first round. I could see it. I could certainly see that being a pick. I love it. That'd be great. I know in about a week and a half when we go mock draft 2.0, or maybe in a week or whatever, but mock draft 2.0, we're both going to have that as that pick at 27 now. But
out of it, we can. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But you got anything that you're working on right now?
Yeah. So extending kind of what I did with the offensive lineman, I'm now working on running back specifically, then I'll venture over to the wide receiver group, but running backs working on total touches, total rushes, fumble percentages, this, that, and the other. So maybe some surprising numbers that you didn't expect. You know, we talked a little bit, me poking more at you with Jonathan Taylor. He fumbled in 36, I believe, % of his games at Wisconsin. So that's not an average. That's just saying, hey, he fumbled in, at least one fumble in 36% of his games. So it's not great. But it's even with the 900 carries, the 18 fumbles, the number's still pretty high. He's not the highest. I think Antonio Gibson had 2, only on like 33 carries though at Memphis. He kind of played that dynamic role, bouncing in between wide receiver and running back. But yeah, I think DeAndre Swift's at 7. I don't have it in front of me, but I won't spoil the article when it comes out. But a lot of interesting numbers and maybe some surprising numbers of who has a little more fumbles. Taylor takes a lot of the brunt of that conversation, but there's a lot of backs too that have kind of have that number is rising a little bit, and it's not to the public's belief because Taylor kind of takes the brunt when those fumble concerns conversations come up.
Let the people know. So you guys, of course, like I said at the beginning of the show, you can see all of that content. Get the Cover One app for free in your app store. Go to cover1.net. There's tons of information on how to download. It's free to download. You can also become a premium subscriber for $10 a year. I mean, I get it. Things are tight right now, but $10 a year, go ahead and do that. You get more premium content than anywhere else. I promise you that. More in-depth X's and O's than anywhere else. You get film evaluation, film reviews with players, the podcast, all the works, our Slack channel where you can talk to us. We'll break down film for you live right there. So it's a lot of fun. Get the Cover One app. Become a premium subscriber today as well. Be sure to find us on Twitter @_Christian Page, @Russ NFL Draft. Smash the follow buttons. Tomorrow morning, if you have the Cover One app, you will have a push notification for Brandon Ayuk. I will have that article up tonight, ready to go. CP will be the one editing it, more than likely. So until next time, this is Cover One, the Draft Podcast.